Welcome back to the Rules Plus podcast. The Sibling Rules Project continues with discussion of the similarities and differences between rules regarding the dyad of personal foul and unsportsmanlike conduct, the lucky 13th dyad I've chosen to consider among rules separated at birth. My goal for the project is to consider 15 rules dyads that I find helpful in creating a better mind map to understand the neighborhoods where parallel rules live. Like last episode's dyad of illegal touch versus illegally touching, the components of this week's dyad for study are essentially twins, but of the fraternal type. The distinction between them is supposed to be easily discernible because the consequences are anything but irrelevant. The impact of a personal foul lasts for one play, while the impact of unsportsmanlike conduct can last one game or more. Think of soccer and the impact of a yellow card versus the impact of a red card, a cautionary admonition versus a possible immediate banishment. But do we do a good job of telling these fouls apart? Do we really grasp the difference between these types of fouls? Both carry a 15-yard penalty. Both may occur during a dead ball as well as a live ball, and both may involve physical contact or not. So how is someone other than Mother NCAA in the person of Steve Shaw, Secretary Rules Editor for the NCAA Football Rules Committee, supposed to be able to tell these twins apart? In Rule 9, the two foul types are treated in separate sections: personal fouls in Section 1 and unsportsmanlike conduct fouls in Section 2. In Appendix F, the official signals for the two foul types are separate as well. Personal fouls indicated using signal 38 and unsportsmanlike conduct fouls indicated using signal 27. And in Appendix G, the summary of penalties lists 45 fouls that include a penalty of 15 yards. For 16 of them, signal 38 for personal foul applies, and for 22 of them, signal 27 for unsportsmanlike conduct applies. In only one case are both signals 38 and 27 interchangeable. And perhaps surprisingly, the summary of penalties lists 8 15-yard fouls for which neither signal 38 nor 27 is to be used. I will cover each set of fouls: the set of 16 that require signal 38, the set of 22 that require signal 27, and the set of 8 that require neither signal. The reason that the elements of the three sets add up to 46 instead of 45 is that, as I mentioned, for one foul, both signals 38 and 27 are appropriate. I think we would find it useful to create a rubric for classifying 15-yard fouls. I think once you see which fouls fall in which set, you'll notice a pattern for each set that will help you distinguish between a personal foul, indicated generically by the NCAA Foul Code UNR, and an unsportsmanlike conduct foul, indicated generically by the NCAA Foul Code UNS. And you'll recognize them when you see it. I propose to you a rubric for distinguishing between UNR fouls and UNS fouls, a rubric based on the traditional three considerations that should guide any official's judgment concerning whether an action rises to the level of a foul. In deciding whether to drop a flag, veteran officials know that we should consider whether an action had an impact on 1. Player safety, 2. Competitive balance, or 3. Sportsmanship. If an act checks one or more of those three boxes, we should rule a foul has occurred. I suggest that over the years, members of the NCAA Rules Committee apply a similar internalized rubric when they consider rules additions, modifications, and deletions, intuitively, if not always consciously. It strikes me that the changes we've seen in recent years skew pretty heavily to considerations to improve player safety and support sportsmanship, and not so much competitive balance. For example, recent changes discouraging kickoff returns, limiting blocking below the waist, and severely punishing blows to the head and neck area are clearly efforts to make the game safer, both out of genuine concern for student athletes, but also out of sensitivity to concerns among the public and government officials about excessive violence in football. And recent changes discouraging imitation of NFL behaviors, such as elaborate choreographed celebrations and taunting of opponents, are clearly efforts to erect guardrails for the college game to keep it aligned with notions of civility and respect that college presidents and alumni would like for the public to associate with the ethos of higher education. As I consider each set of fouls, see if you agree with my evaluation of which of these three considerations, safety, fairness, and decorum, applies to the elements of the set. Personal fouls indicated by signal 38. The set of 16 fouls, signaled as personal fouls, comprises acts that typically involve contact with an opponent, usually during a live ball, but also possibly during a dead ball. Here are the elements of the set, and again there are 16. Tackling or blocking a fair catcher, striking or tripping, targeting, initiating contact with the crown of the helmet, one form of targeting, or targeting, initiating contact to the head or neck area of a defenseless player, the other form of targeting, late hit, action out of bounds, helmet and face mask fouls, continuous contact to the helmet or hands to the face, leverage or leaping, fouling an opponent obviously out of the play, hurdling, illegal contact against the snapper, horse collar tackle, roughing the kicker or holder, continued participation without a helmet, illegal blindside block, and fighting. Other than contacting a player making a fair catch and fighting, every foul in this set is covered in Section 1 of Rule 9. Its heading says it all: personal fouls. I can't think of another section in the NCAA rules that so comprehensively covers a single set of infractions in one place. Section 1 comprises 18 articles that cover just about any unsafe action a player could engage in on a football field. Among concerns for ensuring safety, fairness, and decorum, the three considerations NCAA rules are designed to address, it seems clear to me that UNR rules do the heavy lifting for legislating safety. Judge for yourself if the titles of the 18 articles in Section 1 don't comprise an exhaustive list of provisions explicitly included to rein in dangerous acts. The articles are 1. Flagrant fouls, 2. Striking fouls and tripping, 3. Targeting and making forcible contact with the crown of the helmet, 4. Targeting and making forcible contact to the head or neck area of a defenseless player, 5. Clipping, 6. Blocking below the waist, 7. Late hit, action out of bounds, 8. Helmet and face mask fouls, 9. Roughing the passer, 10. Chop blocking, 11. Leverage and leaping, 12. Contact against an opponent out of the play, 13. Hurdling, 14. Contact against the snapper, 15. Horse collar tackle, 16. Roughing or running into kicker or holder, 17. Continued participation without a helmet, And 18, blindside block. One lengthy statement at the beginning of Section 1 specifies the generic penalty for any action deemed a personal foul. There are three primary provisions. 1, 15 yards. 2, automatic first down for fouls by Team B. And 3, enforcement from the previous spot for fouls by Team A. Other provisions address live ball versus dead ball enforcement, fouls in the end zone, and fouls during pass or kick plays. And there are a few article-specific statements of penalties. If you're paying close attention, you may be wondering why there are 16 specific fouls for which Signal 38 is specified, and yet there are 18 articles in Section 1. The answer is that Section 1 includes two generic articles concerning circumstances surrounding unsafe actions rather than concerning specific unsafe actions themselves. Article 1 addresses situations when a foul should be considered to be flagrant, and Article 7 addresses situations when a foul occurs late or out of bounds. And you may also wonder about Article 17, concerning the dastardly act of continued participation without a helmet. We think of personal fouls as unsafe acts or simple cheap shots against an opponent. A player who continues to participate without his helmet would seem to be only committing an unsafe act against himself. Why should he be assessed a personal foul? Well, it's not without precedent for the NCAA Rules Committee to restrict acts that are dangerous to an offending player as well as to the offended player. The strict prohibitions and penalties associated with targeting, for example, have been adopted as much to protect the player doing the targeting as to protect the player being targeted. In the case of a player without a helmet, he deserves protection, so there should be a penalty for his imprudent action. Since the purpose of such a penalty is related to safety, it's appropriate for the penalty to be 15 yards. While calling the foul unsportsmanlike conduct would seem appropriate, the concern is that assessing a first UNS foul places a player in jeopardy of disqualification should he commit a second UNS foul. And therein lies the critical difference between personal fouls and unsportsmanlike conduct fouls, the carryover impact of UNS fouls. It hardly seems appropriate for a player who is continuing to try to help his team, even without his helmet, to be placed in jeopardy by a first UNS foul. Assessing a UNR foul provides the 15-yard disincentive to continue play without treating the offender as being unsporting. There's also another reason, in my view, that a UNR foul is appropriate. A helmetless player who continues to participate creates a dilemma for opponents. Do they engage him? Do they avoid him? Do they expect him to initiate contact with them? What should they do? By creating indecision, possibly confusion for opponents, a helmetless player arguably puts players in vulnerable positions and perhaps gains a competitive advantage for his team. Now let's consider unsportsmanlike conduct fouls, indicated by signal 27. The set of 22 fouls signaled as unsportsmanlike conduct fouls comprises acts that typically don't involve contact with an opponent, usually during a dead ball, but also possibly during a live ball. The set has the following elements: marking the ball, changing numbers to deceive the opponent, wearing a home jersey without permission, using illegal signal devices, using rapid substitutions to the opponent's disadvantage, having an illegal wedge formation, certain defensive restrictions, a kicker simulating being roughed, obscene or vulgar language, having persons illegally on the field, a player not returning the ball to an official, provoking ill will, unsportsmanlike conduct, persons leaving the team area, illegal return of a disqualified player, noise by persons subject to the rules, concealing the ball, simulated replacements or substitutions, using equipment to confuse opponents, intentionally contacting an official, game administration interference, and fighting. Unlike in the case of personal fouls, many, but certainly not most of the fouls in this set are covered in a single section of Rule 9. Here's the breakdown. Covered in Rule 1 are violations of administrative requirements concerning marking the ball, changing jersey numbers to deceive, wearing the appropriate jersey, and using illegal signal devices. Covered in Rule 3 is making rapid substitutions to deceive. Covered in Rule 6 is using a wedge formation. Other than certain defensive restrictions and a kicker simulating being roughed, covered in Section 1 of Rule 9, the remaining 14 fouls are covered in Section 2 of Rule 9, whose heading reads Unsportsmanlike Conduct Fouls, a bit of deceptive advertising compared to the heading for Section 1. Along with the provisions in Rules 1, 3, 6, and Section 1 of Rule 9, Section 2 comprises 7 articles that cover just about any unsporting action a player could engage in on a football field. Judge for yourself if the titles of these 7 articles don't comprise an exhaustive list of provisions explicitly included to rein in indecorous acts. 1. Unsportsmanlike acts. 2. Unfair tactics. 3. Unfair acts. 4. Contacting an official. 5. Game administration and sideline interference. 6. Ejected players and coaches. 7. Use of tobacco. If you're paying close attention, once again, you may be wondering why there are 22 specific fouls for which Signal 38 is specified, and yet there are 18 articles in Section 2. Well, it's pretty clear why that is, given that several of the articles present generic characterizations of specific fouls, such as unsportsmanlike acts and unfair tactics, and given that some unsportsmanlike fouls result from failure to follow provisions concerning procedures and protocols in Rules 1, 3, and 6. Among the objectives of the trinity of ensuring safety, fairness, and decorum, it seems clear to me that UNR rules do the heavy lifting for legislating decorum for sure, but also for legislating fairness to a degree. I think the Section 2 articles in Rule 9 are largely about decorum, while the sections in Rules 1, 3, and 6 are largely about fairness. I should add, however, that UNS rules don't ignore safety. Discouraging extravagant celebrations, taunting, rude behavior by coaches and players, and an undisciplined sideline encroaching on territory officials need to do their job certainly contributes to checks on escalation of emotions and efficient game administration, supporting the safety of players, coaches, and officials. The third set of fouls you might call orphan fouls. These are the fouls indicated by neither Signal 38 nor 27. They are: the team is not ready to play at the start of either half. That seems to address decorum. Interference with opportunity to catch a kick. That's fairness. Offensive pass interference. That's about fairness. Defensive pass interference. That's about fairness. And finally, clipping, blocking below the waist, roughing the passer, and chop blocking, all of which seem to be about safety. So this final set of 8 fouls does seem to touch all three of the elements of the trinity of considerations for whether fouls should be called. The absence of signal 38 and 27 is perhaps a bit baffling, but that's the way it's recorded, at least in the appendix of the NCAA rules book. At this point, I think it makes sense to consider the impact of UNR versus UNS fouls in special circumstances, three in particular. I think three common special circumstances illustrate the importance of differentiating between fouls with 15-yard enforcements: extra periods, try downs, and touchdown plays with 15-yard penalties by the non scoring team. Consider first extra periods. While both UNR and UNS fouls can occur in either live ball or dead ball intervals, UNS fouls may carry a special provision that enforcement is from the succeeding spot, or that we should treat the foul as if it occurred during the subsequent dead ball interval. Flagrant UNR fouls may often carry a similar provision, but flagrant UNR fouls are thankfully rare. In most cases, it is UNS fouls that carry these special provisions that UNR fouls generally don't. Essentially, the presence of a blanket provision for penalizing from the succeeding spot, or to use dead ball enforcement, means that in the case of a UNS foul that occurs during a live ball, we treat the foul as if it occurred during a dead ball. For example, the penalty specified for sideline interference in 925B is to, quote, administer as a dead ball foul 15 yards from the succeeding spot. Automatic first down for fouls by Team B if not in conflict with other rules, end quote. The prescribed official signal is number 27. In special situations such as extra periods and tries, UNR and UNS fouls may be handled differently. Consider the common exceptions for penalty enforcement after a change of possession during such special situations, as in the following example. Notice the exceptions during extra periods in enforcing fouls after a change of team possession in 313G. And I quote, G, fouls after a change of team possession. And there's a reference here to approved ruling 313, plays Roman 11 to Roman 13. Continuing the quote, 1. Penalties against either team are declined by rule in extra periods. Now, here's the important stuff. Exceptions: penalties for flagrant personal fouls, unsportsmanlike conduct fouls, dead ball personal fouls, and live ball fouls treated as dead ball fouls are enforced on the succeeding play. Continuing the quote, 2. A score by a team committing a foul during the down is canceled. And again, importantly, there's this exception: a live ball foul treated as a dead ball foul. And finishing the quote, 3. If both teams fouled during the down and Team B had not fouled before the change of possession, the fouls cancel and the down is not repeated. And again, exceptions: penalties for flagrant personal fouls, unsportsmanlike conduct fouls, dead ball personal fouls, and live ball fouls treated as dead ball fouls are enforced on the succeeding play, end quote. And I have added the emphasis to the text and the language of the exceptions. Next, consider the special circumstance of try downs. You'll notice similar exceptions during try downs and enforcing fouls after a change of team possession in 8-3-4. And again, I will quote, fouls during a try after a change of team possession. Article 4A. Penalties against either team are declined by rule. But again, exception. Penalties for flagrant personal fouls, unsportsmanlike conduct fouls, dead ball personal fouls, and live ball fouls treated as dead ball fouls are enforced on the succeeding kickoff or at the succeeding spot in extra periods. See Rule 835. And there is a reference then to approved rulings for 834, Roman numerals 1 and 2. Continuing to quote, B, a score by a team committing a foul during the down is canceled. As you would expect, exception, live ball foul treated as a dead ball foul, and a reference to approved ruling 832, number Roman 7. And finally, closing the quote, C, if both teams fouled during the down and Team B had not fouled before the change of possession, the fouls cancel, the down is not repeated, and the try is over. And again, here's the ever-present exception. Penalties for flagrant personal fouls, unsportsmanlike conduct fouls, dead ball personal fouls, and live ball fouls treated as dead ball fouls are enforced on the succeeding kickoff or at the succeeding spot in extra periods. See Rule 835. And that's the end of the quote. Again, look at how similar the rules and the exceptions are concerning try downs as compared to extra periods. You should note that the exception typically does not include mere personal fouls. The exception typically does include flagrant personal fouls, UNS fouls, and live ball fouls treated as dead ball fouls, which are included among many provisions for UNS fouls. And now the third special circumstance, fouls during a touchdown play. You should note that all personal fouls carry a 15-yard penalty, but not all 15-yard penalties are personal fouls. For example, pass interference, kick-catch interference, and tackling a player who has signaled for a fair catch are not personal fouls. Those fouls are listed in 738, 641, and 655, respectively, not in Section 1 of Rule 9. The penalty specifies a 15-yard penalty in each case, but does not refer to the offending action as a personal foul. So what, you ask? Well, consider this provision in 10.2.5 to penalize the opponent of a team that scores a touchdown. And I quote, fouls during or after a touchdown, field goal, or try. Article 5, A, fouls by the non-scoring team during a down that ends in a touchdown, not on the try. 1. 15-yard penalties for personal fouls and for unsportsmanlike conduct fouls are enforced on the try, the succeeding kickoff, or from the succeeding spot in extra periods at the option of the scoring team. 2. 5 and 10-yard penalties are not enforced on the try or the succeeding kickoff. Such penalties are declined by rule unless enforcement is made possible by illegal touching of a kick during the down. And there's a reference to approved rulings for 632, Roman 3, and Roman 4. End quote. A common scenario would be for A83 to catch a pass and run for a touchdown despite pass interference 25 yards downfield by B45. While pass interference in this case would result in a 15-yard penalty, the infraction was not a personal foul, so Team A would decline the foul with no carryover enforcement on the try or succeeding kickoff. On the other hand, if there were no interference, but B45 pulled A83's face mask in a futile attempt to tackle him, the touchdown would count and the penalty would be carried over to the try or succeeding kickoff. So, be careful to avoid overgeneralizing that all 15-yard fouls by opponents of a team that scores a touchdown should be carried over. Nevertheless, in reference to 10.2.5, remember the exceptions in Rule 5 concerning down and possession after a penalty. I quote again, foul before change of team possession. Article 3, A. If a penalty is accepted for a foul that occurs between the goal lines before a change of team possession during a down, the ball belongs to Team A. The down shall be repeated unless the penalty also involves loss of down, mandates a first down, or leaves the ball on or beyond the line to gain. And note the exceptions, Rules 8.3.3b1, 10.2.3, 10.2.4, and the rule in question here, 10.2.5. And there is a reference to approved ruling 10.2.3 Roman 1. Continuing to quote, B, if the penalty involves loss of down, the down shall count as one of the four in that series. And Article 4, if a penalty is accepted for a foul that occurs during a down after a change of team possession, the ball belongs to the team in possession when the foul occurred. The down and distance established by any such penalty shall be first down with a new line to gain. And again, here is the very important exception, Rule 10.2.5a, end quote. In an earlier episode, we talked about a situation in which Team B is the one scoring a touchdown after a foul by Team A before possession changed. The exceptions in 5.2.3 and 5.2.4 mean that Team B may accept the touchdown and the penalty for a 15-yard foul by Team A while Team A was in possession. The scenario would be something like this. During Team A's pass play, A48 delivers an illegal blindside block before B14 intercepts the pass and returns it for a touchdown. Even though A48's foul occurred while Team A was in possession, and the foul had nothing to do with the subsequent touchdown run play by B14, Team B may have the penalty enforced on the try or subsequent kickoff. Without the exceptions, a penalty enforced against Team A would leave Team A in possession of the ball. So here are 4 takeaways from this episode that I think will help all of us. 1. Rules regarding actions that should be considered personal fouls largely address safety, while rules regarding behaviors that should be considered unsportsmanlike conduct largely address decorum. Both sets of rules tend to address fairness at least tangentially and sometimes directly. 2. The penalties for personal fouls and unsportsmanlike conduct fouls always include a 15-yard penalty and an automatic first down. Some years previously, it was not true that both types of fouls included the first down provision. 3. Penalties for personal fouls do not accrue. Penalties for unsportsmanlike conduct fouls do accrue, requiring disqualification after the second instance. However, any single personal or unsportsmanlike foul deemed flagrant subjects the offender to ejection or disqualification. A flagrant personal foul is defined by 210.3 as, quote, illegal physical contact so extreme or deliberate that it places an opponent in danger of catastrophic injury, end quote. There is no definition of a flagrant unsportsmanlike conduct foul, but the penalty provisions for UNS fouls typically include, quote, flagrant offenders shall be disqualified or ejected, end quote. And 4, the difference between being disqualified and being ejected consists in whether a player may remain in the team area. Under NCAA rules, a disqualified player may do so. An ejected player may not. This is not a distinction observed in Texas high school football, because all players must remain in the presence of and under supervision by the responsible adults in charge of the team. Next week, I will wrap up consideration of the UNR versus UNS dyad with guidance on the referee's mechanics for signaling these fouls, summarizing the protocol for choosing among the 17 official signals in Appendix F that are related to UNR and UNS penalty enforcements. Either signal 38 or 27 is used in almost every instance, often alone as the only signal given, yet sometimes one of the two signals may be used as part of a sequence of 2 or 3 signals. Following the signaling protocol is not a trivial consideration, again, as we'll see next week. Next week's main topic will be the rules dyad for regulation time versus overtime. As the 6 weeks of Texas high school playoffs continue, the stakes are high and the stress on players and coaches is substantial. So we've got to get it right during extra periods when the rules we're used to are modified, when there is a change of possession, during tries and field goals, and when there are penalties to enforce. Remember, I'm a member of the Austin Football Officials Association. If you'd like to learn more about us, contact us. You can email us at recruiting@afoa.ws, visit our website at www.austinfootballofficials.org, or call us at 512-298-2987. Until next time, have a great week.